Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the exact second when everything stops. No sound, no pain, no body, just silence. Now, here's the terrifying part. Every single person who has ever lived reached that moment. And not one of them came back to explain it. Except a few. People who crossed the line and returned with stories they were never supposed to tell. Stories that agree too often, that match too closely, and that science still struggles to explain. So tonight, we're not asking a religious question. We're not asking a philosophical one. We're asking the most dangerous question a human can ask. What do we actually see when we die? And the answer might change how you live long before it answers how you end. In 1991, doctors did something that still makes modern medical textbooks hesitate before explaining it. They didn't fail to save a patient. They didn't lose control of the situation. They did it on purpose. They stopped a woman's heart. They shut down her breathing. They drained blood from her brain until every measurable signal of consciousness disappeared. According to every rule medicine had agreed on, this was not danger. This was death. Her name was Pam Reynolds. But what made her name echo through medical conferences wasn't survival. Hospitals save lives every day. What disturbed doctors was that she came back carrying memories from a time when memories should not exist. She spoke calmly, no panic, no confusion. She described the room as if she had been floating above it. She mentioned tools she never saw with her eyes. She repeated conversations that occurred while her ears were blocked and her brain activity was flat. Every detail was checked. Every detail was correct. At that moment, the question stopped being how medicine saved her life. That part was easy. The harder question arrived quietly, without warning. If she wasn't conscious, and she wasn't unconscious, then where exactly was she? This question didn't begin in a hospital. It began the moment the first human buried the dead and wondered if that was really the end. Every civilization, no matter how far apart, asked the same thing. Not, why do we die, but what happens next? Ancient Egyptians prepared for death more than life. Greek philosophers argued whether the soul survived the body. Modern science tried to ignore the question altogether, but death never agreed to stay quiet. So today, instead of avoiding the question, we'll face it. Not emotionally, not spiritually, but carefully. From three perspectives: science, religion, and logic. No conclusions forced, just evidence and discomfort. Science prefers safe language. It avoids after death. Instead, it studies what happens near it. Near-death experiences. Moments when the body shuts down, but the story doesn't. These experiences come from people who had no heartbeat, no breathing, and no measurable awareness. They were brought back seconds or minutes later, and they all returned with something unexpected: consistency. Again and again, across continents and cultures, the same pattern appears. Leaving the body, watching from above, darkness, a light, a feeling of peace so strong that many didn't want to return. Belief doesn't seem to matter. Christians, Muslims, atheists, and children describe nearly identical sequences. That's strange, because imagination usually reflects what we already believe. Here, it doesn't. Skeptics respond quickly. The brain, they say, is under stress. Oxygen drops, chemicals flood the system, hallucinations follow. A reasonable explanation until the data refuses to cooperate. Some near-death experiences occur when brain activity is completely absent. Flat EEG, no detectable consciousness, yet structured memories are formed, not fragments, not dreams, full experiences. This shouldn't happen. Memory requires processing. Processing requires activity. And yet, something is recording while the system appears offline. So researchers asked a dangerous question. What if consciousness can observe without the body? What if awareness isn't limited to neurons? In 2008, the AWARE study began. Hidden images were placed above hospital beds, visible only from the ceiling. A simple test, a terrifying implication. Some patients described details they should never have seen. Conversations, movements, equipment placement. Science didn't panic, but it didn't smile either. Because consciousness was no longer behaving like a physical object, it didn't fade gradually, it didn't break predictably, it behaved differently. So science reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Not that the soul exists, not that religion was right, just this: consciousness is still not understood. Religion, however, never waited for certainty. It approached death through meaning. And strangely, religions that never met describe similar transitions. Islam speaks of separation and awareness. Christianity speaks of peace and light. Eastern traditions speak of detachment and continuity. Different languages, same direction. None of them describe death as emptiness. None describe silence. That alone should make us pause. What's unsettling is that modern near-death reports often mirror ancient texts written centuries ago by people who had no science to guide them. So either humans invented the same story repeatedly, or they've been describing the same experience all along. Now remove belief completely. No religion, no spirituality, just logic. Your body constantly changes. Cells die and regenerate, yet your sense of self remains. Memory remains. Identity remains. So where is it stored? If consciousness were purely material, it should decay like hardware. But it doesn't behave like matter. What if the brain doesn't create consciousness? What if it filters it like a lens filters light? A radio doesn't create music, it receives it. Break the radio and the music stops, but the signal continues. If that's true, death wouldn't destroy consciousness. It would simply end the connection. Then there's time. Near-death experiences collapse it. Entire lifetimes reviewed in moments, time loses meaning. Physics already tells us time is flexible, relative, dependent on perspective. Consciousness outside the body may also exist outside time. So maybe asking what happens after death is wrong, because after assumes time still applies. Science hesitates. Religion points. Logic suggests continuity, different approaches, same direction. Here's the real twist. People don't change after death. They change after thinking seriously about it. Survivors return less afraid, more empathetic, less focused on status, more focused on meaning. Maybe death isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's meant to remind us that time matters. Because if consciousness doesn't vanish, then fear loses power, and meaning becomes urgent. Life stops feeling like rehearsal and starts feeling final, precious, real. So what do we see after death? Science doesn't know. Religion suggests continuity. Logic refuses emptiness. But all three agree on one thing: death is not nothing. And maybe the real reason we ask about death is not to prepare for what comes next, but to finally understand how to live now.